Good morning, friends, and welcome to our regular Sunday meeting at the United Lodge of Theosophists in the Washington, D.C. area. Today is the fourth of our series of talks on Masterworks of Modern Theosophy. The first being on the Isis Unveiled, the second, the Secret Doctrine, the third was the Key to Theosophy, and today it will be on the Voice of the Silence, which was the last masterwork that HPB published. First, we'll look at the quotes from HPB, Mr. Judge, and Mr. Crosby, and a reading of the Declaration, which is on the back of our program. It's only a few paragraphs, and then we'll get into the talk. So, for June 28th, HPB said, "When to the world's turmoil thy budding soul lends ear, when to the roaring voice of the great illusion thy soul responds, when frightened at the sight of the hot tears of pain, when deafened by the cries of distress, thy soul withdraws like the shy turtle within the carapace of selfhood, learn, O disciple, of her silent God, thy soul is an unworthy shrine." And it is from the Voice of the Silence. Mr. Judge stated, "If we live in our hearts, we soon prove that space and time exist not. Nothing foreign to Master enters there. Our faults are not there. The heart reaches him always, and no doubt he replies." And Mr. Crosby said, "Do not distress yourself. Have confidence in the powers which you embody. Seek only to do your duty. Holding to that end, all necessary power will be available." All three are very coordinated. And the Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists: "The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions, differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor offices, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all." The following is a form signed by the associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists if they choose to do so. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in this declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. So we're going to move along now with the talk on the voice of the silence. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome, friends. Today we're discussing The Voice of the Silence, which is a devotional book that HPB wrote towards the end of her lifespan on Earth. It was written in 1889 and published during the same year. If we look at the preface, it gives us a tremendous amount of information. We are told that the voice of the silence was derived from the Golden Precepts, which is given to the students, mystical students in the East. And she tells us that she had learned 39 of these when she was a student herself. She had memorized 39, and the book is based only on those 39. There are about 90 treatises in all, but she felt perhaps we were not ready for the rest, and she did not give it. We are told that Book of Zan also has a similar root, including Paramartha, which is a work given to Arhat by the serpents here meaning initiates. Yet we are told that its precepts are scattered in Upanishads and in Nyaneshvari, if that's the correct spelling, where Krishna describes to Arjuna an illumined condition of a yogi. We are told that the original precepts are engraved on thin oblongs, and the copies are normally on discs, and these are placed in the temples. There are Mahayana schools. These are the Yogacharya schools, and these are the ones that she particularly mentions in the preface. Also, she was a student of Senzar. She learned Senzar, and she tells us that Senzar is the language of the adepts and initiates. It is written in cipher form, even though it has an alphabet of its own, and she tells us several modes of its writing, one of which is the 12 signs of the zodiac in combination with colors, and it gives an alphabet of ideographs, and depending what sign is put at the beginning of the passage, the student then knows in what style it is going to be read. And if we think about why was this information included at the beginning of the Voice of the Silence, it kind of hints to us that perhaps the Voice of the Silence itself is written in cipher form. Because as every student knows who have read it, it does not impart its underlying meaning very easily. The student has to read it, learn it, digest it, make it his or her own, and only then, as time goes on, it will give underlying meanings, because every time one reads it, it kind of imparts a little bit further information to us. And the dedication. Isis is dedicated to the Theosophical Society, the Secret Doctrine to all those that called for it in every land, Theosophical students, and the key is dedicated to all of our students. But the dedication of the Voice of the Silence is to the few. Perhaps we can discuss this further later on, but it also gives an implication as to what is in it and how we are going to absorb it and make it our own. In other words, it isn't going to be easy. The book itself is in 3 fragments. The first fragment is called The Voice of the Silence. The second fragment is The Two Paths, and the third is the Paramitas, the 7 portals. What happened to my pen? So, the Voice of the Silence. These are not separate from these do not form separate compartments, but they're all interrelated. On the first page of the Voice of the Silence, she's talking about meditation. This is a necessary requisite, as we all know, to achieve in order to learn how to meditate. And in the Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, the similar instruction is given, which is rendered by Mr. Judge. Here we are told that there are 2 different psychic powers in men. One is coarse and related to our lower mind, and the other, the higher, is in conjunction with the higher mind, and it requires a tremendous amount of effort and purification for its achievement. And this is requisite because if we do not know how to quieten ourselves, we will not be able to listen to the soundless sound, which is called nada. The soundless sound then is the hum in the heart. It's the heart. And then we are told to learn to differentiate between the eye, the head, and the heart doctrine. So that also gives an indication that this is going to teach us to differentiate between those. Well, what exactly are we talking here? We're talking about intellect versus the knowledge that comes from the higher aspect of our mind. And we are told that it is each one's responsibility to seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer, who awakes illusion and slate. This is the mind. But there is a dichotomy here because we're talking about the lower versus the higher. So until we have learned to be harmonious, patient, and observe silence, we will not be able to hear the soundless sound. And this is the first part. Then we go into the halls of learning, and where we are to look for our teacher or guru, remembering that there is an inner and there is also an outer guru. And we're not going to spend our time in the elusive aspects, but try to reach beyond the illusion where the omniscience is, where the truth lies. And at the end of the first fragment, it says, "And now, Lanu, thou art the doer and the witness, the radiator and the radiation, light in the sound and sound in the light." And we have reached the voice of the silence, the truth. Now, the two paths. The two paths are that of the head and the other one of the heart. We are going to look for wisdom. Where exactly is wisdom to be found? The wisdom is within, and we are going to bring it out. So, the eye or head and the heart. The Dharma of the eye is the embodiment of the external and the non-existing. The Dharma of the heart is the embodiment of body, the permanent and everlasting. So the second one then, the second fragment is about obtaining knowledge. And once we have purified ourselves and have reached that goal, what is it that is being asked of us? We have a choice to make. We're either going to choose liberation or renunciation. And there is a difference between these two. The first path is liberation. The secret path leads the Arhan to mental woe unspeakable, woe for the living dead, and helpless pity for the men of karmic sorrow. The fruit of karma sages dare not steal. So this is the path of woe. This is renunciation. The secret way leads also to paranirvanic bliss, but at the close of kalpas without number, nirvanas gained and lost from boundless pity and compassion for the world of deluded mortals. But it is said, the last shall be the greatest. Samyak Sambuddha, the teacher of perfection, gave up his self for the salvation of the world by stopping at the threshold of nirvana, the purest state. So we're either going to follow liberation and liberate ourselves with no concern as to the rest of humanity that is left in suffering, or we are going to renounce what we have achieved and help humanity also move in that direction of purification and enlightenment. The third fragment is the 7 portals. Here we are in the care of the Guru, and the Guru, Upadaya, is a spiritual preceptor, can only show the way, can guide us how to get on the path, but there is only one path, and how we are going to walk on this path depends on each student himself or herself. The student has to do the work, in other words. The master can only show the way, cannot do the work for us. Are we going to use the dhyana path, or are we going to use the paramita path? The dhyana path is 4-fold. The paramitas are 7. The paramitas require even a steeper climb to reach it, because these 7 strongholds are held by cruel, crafty powers. What are the dhyana path? What are the 4 steps in it? Well, Mr. Judge actually gave it in the 3rd book of the Patanjali. HPB has the information scattered all through the voice of the silence. Dhyana, Dharana, Samadhi, Samadhi being the highest, and these are stages as we walk that path of meditation. At the end, when we become one-pointed, that is the highest achievable, we look at everything directly, ideas, subject, object, and we know what it is because we're looking at it directly. It's direct perception, and when it is one-pointed, it cannot err. In other words, it's faultless vision. So when we reach Samadhi, we have reached faultless vision. And this is the highest. This is Samadhi. And the 3 together constitutes Sanyama, which is perfect meditation or contemplation. Now the paramitas are called divine virtues. Divine virtues. What are these? It is recommended that we make a parabola like this and list them on it. We have Dana, and then we have Sheila, then we have Shanti, and here we have Viraga, and then on the opposite we have the other three. Now when we look at this, then it becomes very obvious why we are told to concentrate on the first three. Dana or Dana, love, charity. Well, can there be any spiritual life without it? No, I don't think so. I think love and charity is the first step. Now, these are listed on page 52 of the Voice of the Silence, and it is necessary that we walk all of these together, not separately, together. Love and charity, harmony in word and action is Sheila, Shanti is sweet patience that nothing can ruffle, and Viraga is learning not to be pulled by the opposites. In other words, overcoming pleasure and pain, because this is illusion, and it is necessary for all of the paramitas. To overcome that illusion is necessary. Dhyana is, Virya is a spiritual energy that is also necessary for fighting all these crafty powers. Dhyana obviously is meditation. Prajna is the spiritual wisdom. So all of these work together, but what opens the door is Dana or Dana, however we pronounce it, charity and love. So why does she tell us that this requires a very steep path? And if you look at the Gita, that also brings forth for the seeker of that path 3 options. One is knowledge, the other one is action, and the third one is devotion. Now, can these all be separate from one another? In this student's opinion, no. We have to walk it together. The 3 walks together. So, as we are learning how to give discriminately, because that is charity, we're also using patience to cultivate our ability, and harmony is necessary. If we don't have internal harmony, we cannot possibly exert it on the outer physical world. So internally, we need to be harmonious so that we can exert that harmony externally. So, in this paramita path, it is necessary to constantly be vigilant. We cannot let go of it. Once we start it, we're going to continue with it and work with it, and each one, HPB tells us, is controlled by crafty powers. What she's suggesting here is very powerful, because she tells us, here is the gate, and this is what you have to do in order to go through the gate. So the paramita is the key that opens the gate. The gate is a very powerful sign. It requires opening, and once opened, we're going to go through it. But that is when the fight begins, and we have to continue cultivating it. So these portals then are necessary for the advancing students on this path. And the path is not easy. It is hazardous and crafty. And we're going to be tested all the time as we're walking it. What is necessary to remember here? That there's only one life, which is unity. One life, unity. We are part of the whole. So there is tremendous power in unity. If we remain united and all our work goes towards disseminating this philosophy to the general public, which is in need of it very badly, we're attracting similar minds to ourselves, and so as we cultivate it, we can give it out with greater force. That unity is necessary because it is based on a fact in nature, which is brotherhood. Brotherhood is not a word, it is an expression of nature. So if we follow that expression, then certain gates and powers become available to us because we are working with nature and we want to be helpful to move humanity forward. And this student found a very poignant statement in one of these articles. It says here, viraga, desirelessness or detachment, is also a spiritual attachment to the source of all 7 paramitas, which is compassion absolute. Compassion absolute. This is also law. It's the law of laws. So the compassion is at the core of every human being also. It is the core of our universe because all of the energies that flow express that compassion or care or concern for all, not just little bitty parts, all of it. Its concern is for all. It is very important that we understand what this path defines and what the virtues stand for, and that as we move through the gates, it becomes available as a source of aid to humanity. It's very important to understand it. So these are not separate. The fragments give us indications as to what it is we need to do, how to do it, and it requires dauntless energy, but at the same time indomitable willpower and courage to have a universal vision and stay with that universal vision even if everything around us is opposed to it, and remain faithful to the Master's message. The philosophy comes from divine human beings, holy divine beings, who are for the benefit of humanity, and all of nature comes under their jurisdiction, and they interject this philosophy into the world we live in whenever they can. So HPB then brought it for us towards the end of her life, and this is a spiritual book. Its vision is to give us what is expressed at the end of it, and we shall read it. it says, there, klesha is destroyed forever. Klesha is worldly enjoyment. Tanha's roots torn out. Tanha is the will to live. But stay, disciple, yet one word. Canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute, it is the law of laws. Eternal harmony, alaya self, a shoreless, universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more thou dost become one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites with that which is, the more thou wilt become compassion absolute. Such is the Arya path, path of the Buddhas of perfection. Now bend thy head and listen well, O Bodhisattva. Compassion speaks and saith, can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shalt thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? Now thou hast heard that which was said. Thou shalt attain the seventh step and cross the gate. Excuse me. Thou shalt attain the seventh step and cross the gate of final knowledge, but only to wed woe if thou wouldst be Tathagata. Follow upon thy predecessors' steps. Remain unselfish till the endless end. Thou art enlightened. Choose thy way. Behold, the mellow light that floods the Iskern sky. In signs of praise both heaven and earth unite, and from the fourfold manifested powers a chant of love ariseth, both from the flaming fire and flowing water, and from sweet-smelling earth and rushing wind. A pilgrim hath returned back from the other shore. A new Arhat is born. Peace to all beings. One thing that needs to be mentioned here is in 1989, the 100th anniversary of the publication of the Voice of the Silence was celebrated by a special edition of it, and the foreword was written by the 14th Dalai Lama. And one thing is curious in his foreword. It says the Bodhisattva path. The Bodhisattva path. And a bodhisattva is someone that sacrifices oneself for the benefit of humanity, just like Tathagata, the Buddha, did. And perhaps this will give us an indication as to why dedicated to the few was put at the beginning of this book, because it requires tremendous amount of self-sacrifice to reach the end of such a path and actually dedicate what has been gained to serve humanity with compassion and love. And in 1927, another edition of the Voice of the Silence was published by the 9th Panchen Lama, who put a foreword to it. This was done in Peking, China, but it is in English, and the Panchen Lama wrote the foreword in Tibetan calligraphy. And it reads such as this: all beings desire liberation from misery, seek therefore for the causes of misery, and expunge them. By entering on the path, liberation from misery is attained. Exhort then all beings to enter the path. So then it is for all of us to enter the path. And the Dalai Lama: I believe that individuals can be good human beings without necessarily being spiritual. I also accept their right in not wanting to be spiritual or to believe in a particular religion. At the same time, I have always believed that inner or spiritual development is necessary for greater human happiness and to increase our capacity to benefit others. And now we will open it for comments and questions.
You talked about the three parts of the voice of the silence. Fragments of the voice of the silence. And then you said we have to really merge these three into one to get to a perfect being, if you will.
To achieve perfection.
Perfection, right. So, is it a stretch or reach to say that we all have that capacity within us, and this is the process of the path to bringing all of that out if we work at it? But we have to do the work.
Yes, that is correct. In this Voice of the Silence writings, the concentration is on the higher aspects of the human being. Up to this point, we have dealt with the lower personality and the dichotomy between the higher mind and the lower mind. There's only one mind. It's just that it works in two different ways when we are in incarnation. In a physical body, the intellectual mind, if it is personalized, it pulls down. But when it is altruistic and it has awakened to the inner life, into the inner light in the heart, and realizes that it is part of the whole and that it isn't here for itself, it is for the benefit of the all, that light is the same in every heart. It is not different in each human being. So once that inner realization comes about, then it becomes easier to walk this path. But nevertheless, it is to be attempted, according to the Lama, Panchen Lama, by every human soul, and we're invited to do so. But until that inner awakening occurs, this philosophy might not be followed. But HPB also says there are good theosophists out in the world, and as well as within the confines of Theosophy. So there are a whole bunch of theosophists out in the world. They might not call themselves that, but their aim is to alleviate pain and suffering from humanity, so they come under that same heading.
You mentioned the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama.
Mm-hmm.
What's the relationship between the two?
Well, the student doesn't really know, but the only thing in the writings is that they each confirm one another. So the Panchen Lama confirms the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama confirms the Panchen Lama. There's always two of them.
So they both had comments on the Voice of the Silence, you said.
Yeah, the Dalai Lama is also was up to this point the head of the state of Tibet, which was conquered or invaded by China, and he has been trying to free his nation from this domination, because that is a sacred land. The Chinese just do not perhaps realize it, and if they realize it, perhaps they're ignoring the implications of it, but that is definitely a sacred land. Tibet is a sacred land. We can also mentally understand this, but we have to put it into practice. For instance, a man might be charitable to all those around him, and then is very virtuous also, does not lie, does not cheat. But when it comes to his competitor, he doesn't feel any remorse by taking action to eliminate the other out of that sphere or work, because his work, he wants his work to be the dominating aspect. And if you look at the Hindus, they will, by philosophical argument, logical argument, come to the conclusion that Brahma, the light, is in every heart. But when it comes to societal norm, they have no sadness or thinking that they're doing something wrong by creating an untouchable class in India. Where is that coming from? It comes from the human mind and its defective concepts. But nevertheless, it exists, and they cannot see that as being false. To this student, that man who can, a man or woman for that matter, or whoever, can, by intellectual conviction, prove that Brahma exists in every heart, and then says that there are untouchables around, is an irreligious man, because it is not going with the norm. It's going with the abnormal rather than the norm, because there is no such thing in our universe. No such thing at all. It's just created by the human mind, and it needs to be removed.
You mentioned a defect in common Hinduism because of the human intervention there, selfishness and being implicit in that statement too, to try to control the population. Are there religions that don't have that in them, or do we, except for perhaps Buddhism? Christianity has a similar...
We're not attacking any religion.
People's
religion are what they believe in, and as human beings we're free to believe what we like. But if you can intellectually prove that each human heart has this light in it, and it is called Brahma, the highest, and Panchen Lama is inviting every human soul, because whatever classification we put people under, we're all human souls. We're not bodies. The human soul is on evolution and is getting experience to reach that perfectibility. But superstition and other conditions of our society, selfishness, materialism, power, position, all these things get in the way. But at this stage in our development, we are told that we are truly behind in our spiritual cultivation because of this dominance of superstition in the East and materialism in the West. So we need to correct it. We are not attacking any religion. That's not the purpose of the talk.
I didn't mean to imply that. I probably did. Question. Then this is the fundamental philosophy that really, if we take away everything in the religions, is that what you call theosophy? The fundamental, the commonality, the perfect, if you will, truth?
All religions have virtues and sins classified, but they do not make it a part of our nature. The constitution of man is not studied in religions. The sevenfold nature is not known. Psychology in the West is not based on it. However, the new psychology is coming up and saying that the old method of classification is no longer relevant to human beings. So perhaps we're moving in the right direction, because at that time when these books were published for the first time, HPB in many articles suggested that the West needed to go to the East and learn from them what the psychological classification of human nature ought to be, because the West did not have it. But when you look at science, some of them are moving towards the metaphysical aspects of our lives, without giving any credit to those that came before them and actually brought it out. They just take it and make it their own under a different name. But that's always been the case. So every religion has these rules and regulations, but it is an external component that you are going to abide by. In this study, it is the core. It's within us. Every human being is a soul in evolution. It needs the understanding of who or what we are, where we come from, where we have been, and where we are going. These are necessary for human progress. We don't come from animals. We come from higher intelligences. Now we are totally immersed in substance, matter, but we are also on our upward journey towards the spirituality. We need to just exercise that aspect of our lives more rather than the material aspects.
You talked about the old method of modern psychology in the West, right? But when you're talking about the voice of the silence and what is in that, that is old as well. And that goes back to the night of time, would you say?
Oh, yes.
That's ancient, and
It's
because you
very
talked about the publications. Now, the voice itself, as the ULG has it, the words are the same as HPB left them.
Correct.
It's just students' understanding. The Dalai Lama commented on the voice. Years later, the Panchen Lama commented on the voice, which is a small indication to this student's mind that we have an ageless doctrine here, which really has not changed since the night of time.
Correct. It's very, very old, and she tells us that the precepts have always been there. They just are given in different form. She took the Golden Precepts and gave us the voice of the silence based on 39 of those treatises. So the Gita expresses it in a different way. Patanjali addresses the meditation part. So they're all in coordination with one another. This philosophy is very, very old, and it comes from those who keep it safe for use all through times.
But you have lots of other books behind you there, but we focus on those four. Would you say that these four really are, well, the voice is based on the three previous ones. All this other literature then is based on those four as well?
The Secret Doctrine is based on Zan, which also has a similar root as the precept. Paramartha is the other one. She mentions, I'm not sure whether it is Nayaneshvari or Dhaneshvari. The Puranas, these are very, very old writings, and Vidya Gupta Vidya of India, the Vedas, these are very, very old, and the originals are still kept, even if it is not given to the general public. The originals do exist, and please also remember that HPB in the Secret Doctrine gives us hints that there are underground crypts where original copies of these old knowledge, these books with the old knowledge in them is kept. The originals are kept, and that she says that as time progresses and spirituality is more generally expressed, perhaps other writings will come forth.
Interesting also, the third, didn't mean to monopolize the questions here. If others have questions, please ask them. The third third fragment, in that you mentioned Guru appears. Do we have gurus before then? Should we go out and try to find one? To speed this process up.
Your guru is internal. That's the first line of defense. There is a higher self there, and your appeal is to your higher self for instruction. Higher self is your guru. And the appeal. We have to appeal all the time, says Mr. Judge, and that appeal, the request, will be answered at its appropriate time. The higher self is there. And remember, somewhere in there she says the soul, mute and quiet and silent, dies from airlessness. If we do not encourage that soul life to come forth and express it and follow the precepts given to help us move in that direction, no one else can help you. The higher self is not of this world. It's not of the physical world. It's of the spiritual world. If you do not invite it in, it cannot do anything for you. You have to appeal. You have to comply with the rules. The path, by the way, is an internal path. When we say we're going to follow the path, we're not going to go to the mountains and follow a path. This path is internal. It's the personal being transmuted into impersonal. The selfish to selflessness, the personal to altruism. So when you become universal, impartite, impersonal, you are appealing to your higher self, because she also says the thief is going to be raised. The thief, which is the lower self, cannot by itself do this work. Only when it becomes a server, then that higher self lifts it slowly by enlightening and giving knowledge and information, slowly lifts it up. So if we identify with the higher self, we're doing the work to the best of our ability at all times. This is the key in this voice of the silence. We can be virtuous now and then. This book, with this explanation, is saying you need to be that at all times. In other words, you have now become attuned to the inner life, to your heart, not the intellect, the heart. The compassionate heart has also become intelligent, and the head and the heart and the hands work together. So this is a synthesis. The voice of the silence is a synthetic book. It is telling us that we have to use our hands, we have to use our heart, and we have to use our mind in conjunction with one another to be able to be successfully complete this journey, which is an internal path, not external. Internal. And knowledge and truth are synonymous words or terms in the voice of the silence. Thank you. Our time up.
And next week's talk is on Adepts and the Birth of America, July 5, July 4 being the Independence Day for the United States. Thank you.